Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for coming. So, this is Wellbeing Wednesday, and our focus tonight is going to be on the neck, shoulders, and the arms. And the format of this is going to be a little bit different from some of the usual restorative classes that we do because we're going to look at some things. We're going to look at some anatomy so that we have a sense of the landscape, and that can be helpful just in terms of being able to visualize and then experience in a sensory way what's going on. And we'll go through the anatomy pretty early on. And that's going to be sort of a guide for then our jumping off point into the practices. And we will do a lot of practices. So the first thing that I want to say is this area, neck, shoulders, arms, hands, a lot of people struggle with some or all of that pathway. And there's all kinds of labels that are given to certain very common conditions. So people have torn rotator cuffs, pinched nerves. Bursitis is a common one. That's where the bursa gets inflamed. And for this class, I want to take a little bit more of a broad perspective. All of those diagnoses are valuable. And at the same time, I find that often, on the one hand, when someone's having problems, a diagnosis can feel like a relief, like, oh, so this is the problem that I have. At the same time, the way the involved structures work is layered, and even if there is a particular thing like arthritis or a nerve that's involved, that tissue is enfolded in a set of interrelated structures that all have bearing on one another and all influence one another. And so, in certain ways, diagnoses, I don't want to belittle the value of diagnosis. And at the same time, um, it's useful to take a broader perspective. And by taking that broader perspective, there are some very simple and accessible practices that we can do that can at the very least provide more knowledge and awareness, and often can provide a broader sense of relief, and sometimes can relieve a pain situation completely. To be clear, that doesn't always happen, and this class is not meant to be. I'm not making the statement like this will cure all ills. That's not where we're coming from. We're more coming from providing, especially within an hour, there's only so much we can do. But what I hope to offer you is a more general framework of practices that you can find that is of value, that is generally soothing and works in a more broad scale way. And so as we dive into this, the the first thing I'm going to mention again to reinforce, we're going to look at some anatomy, and of particular interest will be the nerve pathways. And there's some nurses who are here, so some of you will be familiar with this. The main pathway that feeds the nerve pathway that feeds uh, muscles in the shoulders, the arms to the hands, is known as the brachial plexus. The brachial plexus comes off of the several of the neck, the cervical vertebra. If you take your hands here, it can be useful to feel the pathway. So it's coming off these neck vertebra, comes down. Now, there are some muscles and connective tissue that overlay that. And when the nerve is tight, the nerves can aggravate those tissues. And also, the tissues themselves can aggravate the nerves. So, for instance, there are scalene muscles that wrap over the top of those brachial plexus nerves, and they can often pinch on the brachial plexus itself. Plexus means braid, so you can think of this nerve, it's a nerve tree. It's it's a braiding of nerves that come off the spine and then they join and unjoin. You'll see pictures in just a moment. It's like a web or a net. So comes down underneath the collarbones. And so this area here, tissue around the collarbones, is another place that can impinge on those nerves. I will also mention that following the same pathway as the nerves, there are vessels, veins, and arteries. So we've got nerves, arteries, and veins coming through here. So it goes under the collarbone and then out into the arm. There are three major branches. The ulnar branch, which goes to the little finger side of the hand, the median nerve, which comes down and feeds out into the center of the palm, and the radial nerve, which comes out to the thumb side. Okay, and often when there are issues of nerve transmission, when there's some restriction, there's also there can be layered issues of circulation. So this brachial plexus also, there are branches of it that feed various muscles of the shoulder. So not only are all these arm muscles fed by the brachial plexus, but a lot of so the rotator cuff is innervated. When I say innervated, that is a muscle is fed by a nerve. That's the nerve, one of the nerves going to the muscle. So the rotator cuff is fed by branches of the brachial plexus. Also, the phrenic nerve, which goes to the diaphragm, the respiratory diaphragm, comes off of the brachial plexus. And that means that when there's tightness through this area, there's often an impact or an impingement on breathing as well. Again, this is not just about the nerves. So we can think when we hear like an impinged nerve, we think, okay, the problem is in the nerve. But for one, when that's the case, there's always connective tissue sheaths that are clamping on that nerve. So it's also a connective tissue problem. There are muscles that are affected. Again, circulation is involved. And so it's many things. And I don't mean to make that, rather than making that seem more complex, we can take that more broad and holistic awareness of it and come to practices that address some of the practices that we do will address specific tissues, but a lot of what we're going to do tonight is more broad scale. That is influencing a range of tissues and especially influencing the relationship between the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, and the tissues themselves. So that's a little summary of what we're going to be doing. And so now we're going to go to the anatomy, and I'm going to, for those of you in the studio, I have a plate here that you can look at. So y'all can get up, come up here, and then I've got some online stuff to look at. Sometimes anatomy can feel kind of daunting or complex, but I would encourage you to look at this as, if it seems complex, just let yourself absorb it. You can look at the pictures later, and this is a way for us to more clearly inhabit our tissues. And sometimes these tissues are tissues that can be suffering a bit. So by being aware, that's a step toward actually getting out of that suffering. So those of you in the studio can also look at the screen here. So this plate, this shows the cervical spine and the uppermost rib. So this is the first rib right here where I have the cursor. And notice this is the brachial plexus just peeking out. So it has come off of those cervical vertebrae. So basically it goes from the fifth cervical vertebra to the first thoracic. So the first thoracic is the first of the rib vertebra. There's also, it goes up a little higher. There is one little kind of sub branch that comes off the fourth cervical. Now, I mentioned these scalenes. You can see here, there are anterior, that means forward, middle, and posterior. The brachial plexus peeks right out from between those scalene muscles. And if you find your collarbone here and just come up to the neck here, you'll likely feel that that's probably kind of tender. And it may be tender more on one side than the other. This is close to where the scalene muscles attach. And for just about everyone, this area can be really tight. Okay. So we have a location of interest that it's going to be useful to influence the relative tone of this area. And that can be very helpful. Okay, again, we're looking at this holistically. So it's not just the nerve, it's not just the muscle, it's not just the connective tissue, it's the relationship of all of it together. And it's also not the tissue itself, it's the communication between the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, and the tissues. Note as well, there's blood vessels traveling right through here. Okay, the phrenic nerve, this is the nerve that innervates the diaphragm. What we don't see here is the collarbone, the clavicle, and the collarbone would be where I'm moving the cursor here. So when there's tightness in the collarbone, that can compress on the brachial plexus, and it can also restrict circulation. Okay. Next. This is without any muscles, any connective tissue, etc. We've got the first rib here, and the brachial plexus does not sit exactly like this. This is kind of taken out and stretched out. So you have a better scheme of the whole thing. I mentioned that there's one part, a contribution from the fourth cervical that's here, and that actually contributes to the phrenic nerve. But when I mentioned that braid, you can see, so these are nerves coming off of the spine, off of the spinal cord, and they then join back up in all these different ways. And there are a few reasons for that. There's redundancy in terms of the nerve pathways. Those joinings and unjoinings are just part of how it's a little bit like the wiring of an electrical grid or an internet network. There is also, in addition to it just being the pathway that makes sense for the nerve transmissions, there is a structural element, and we'll look at that. This is going into the arm. Now we see the collarbone here. So these are those three main branches. So at this point, so we have the median nerve, the ulnar nerve, the radial nerve. Okay. And then there's some other branches, the musculocutaneous and the axillary come off the branches further up. Okay. But I'm going to come back to this one. So the nerve pathway comes off of the cervical spine, and a bit of the thoracic comes down, and it's a little bit like guy wires. So there is a structural component. There's a certain tautness in the nerves such that they absorb force, and there's a balance of tension between them such that if one side is really tight, it's actually pulling on not only the spinal cord, but the spine itself. You can think about it like a tree, like we establish a little sapling and we've got guy wires, and those guy wires have to be in a kind of balanced tension. And so if one of the guy wires is kind of sagging and the other is overly tight, it's going to pull on the tree in a funky way. There's a similar thing that happens with the nerves. Okay. And this comes into play also with falls. When someone falls on their hand, the arm absorbs that shock and Part of the reason for that braiding is so that that force running through a limb like that is more distributed. So if we just had this straight line and we fell on the arm, there would be much more force going through that individual nerve, and there would be more likelihood of trauma to that nerve and perhaps even the nerve snapping because of all that tension. But we have this situation, it's kind of like a web or a braiding that distributes force. Like it sucks when someone really falls forcefully on their arm and that impact, it does affect the nerve, but it's a better situation than if this braiding were not in place. So we can be kind of thankful for that and also understand the feeling we might get if we're taking too much force through an arm, and how there might be a lot of force on the hand and it could affect the wrist, but people often experience, oh, my shoulder got restricted because of that fall, but I didn't land on my shoulder. That's the reason. The force is coming up through the whole pathway of the nerve. Okay? So there are things we can do that can be very precise and specific for this. And we'll do a little bit of that tonight. But again, a lot of what we do is going to be more broad scale and meant to calm the whole system down. Okay? Okay, before we do that, I'm going to mention a couple other relationships to consider. Jaw tension is often connected to and associated with neck and shoulder tension. It's a different nerve pathway. There's a few different nerves, but the trigeminal nerve, which innervates a lot of the head, is often, it innervates a lot of the jaw mechanism, and it can get chronically tight. And there is very often an association between brachial plexus tightness and trigeminal nerve tightness. The other thing that I'll say about that is the vagus nerve, which is the parasympathetic nerve that really calms us down. And what we do tonight, a lot of our practices will be meant to bring the vagus nerve more online, to activate it, which has a calming response, which is a little counterintuitive because I'm saying we're going to activate the nerve, but it's actually going to have a calming effect. If you come just below your ear and go straight down, you'll be over the sternocleidomastoid muscle for part of that, but further in, that's the pathway coming down from the base of the head, and it feeds a lot of different organs, and it innervates part of the vocal mechanism. So just by gently, and we'll do some of this later, gently massaging from the ear down, this can be a good simple way to encourage the vagus nerve to deliver its more relaxing response. Okay? All right, so I'm going to unshare the screen. And the first practice we're going to do, you will need a wall, a chair, and a bolster. And I'm going to bring the handy dandy audio-visual cart over here so you can have a better view of the situation. So y'all can just come over and observe first of all. Eventually, I'm going to be facing the wall and you all will be facing the wall, but I'm going to show this this way because it might not make a lot of sense if my back is to you. Okay. You will need to play a bit with your distance from the wall. And this is, I will say, a dynamic process, a dynamic practice in the sense that as you're doing it, you will find it useful to adjust your arm position and possibly your head position. You want to keep seeking a sense of ease, basically. So a folding chair works really well. It doesn't have to be a folding chair, but if you have a chair that has an angle like this, that will be helpful. And so I have the legs to either side of the the chair legs here, and then the bolster goes here. I'm going to come into this support, and I'm going to be this is part of what you'll need to play with. You'll need to play with your distance from the wall so that your head is very easily resting into the wall. Then you're going to use your hands. If you're just resting your head into the wall, it may get a little bit uncomfortable. So you can have your hands as a kind of support right here. And it's likely going to be something like the letter W, but you can play with different positions. Just go with what feels best to you, and that may change over time. Okay? So I'm now going to, just before you proceed, I'm going to come into it as it is going to be here so you can see what that is going to look like. And so part of the idea here is to get a little bit of opening in the back of the neck and the sides of the neck and give a sense of support. Okay? Yeah. And so if you rest your head into the wall and your neck feels comfortable, that's a good gauge for doing it as you should be doing it. If your neck doesn't feel quite comfortable, you can play with the angle of the head. You can play with your distance from the wall. Yeah. And we want a sense of space in the neck. Okay? So we're just going to hang out here for a bit. And then there's some other parts of this that I will introduce as we go. So we've got the support from the bolster or pillows if you're using pillows. We've got the support from the wall itself and from the hands in some way. And as much as you're able, let yourself soften into the surfaces you're resting into. That includes feet into the floor, sitting bones into the chair, trunk into the bolster, and head into your hands and the wall. Okay, next part. You're going to have one hand supporting your head, and you may find, look up for a second, you may find that putting your hand into an L shape, one hand into an L shape will give your head support. So try that. If that's not so great for you, just play with other positions. The other hand, you're going to take to the back of your neck and gently knead the back of your neck. Okay, and then switch hands. And then once again, two hands supporting your head. Now bring your attention to your breath. So this folded position And the presence of the bolster in front will tend to route your inhalations into your upper back. This is a good thing. So let your breath be slow, be very, very much unhurried in your breath. You could have your exhalations be a little bit longer than your inhalations. But when you inhale, encourage and be aware of the sensation of your back ribs expanding. As much as you're able to relax your arms and shoulders, let that happen, even as your hands are supporting your head. Okay, come on up. Now, one could spend a longer period of time there so long as doing so is comfortable. So, we have other things to attend to, so we'll be moving on. But if that is comfortable for you, you could spend longer with that. Another thing I'll mention, you can play with variations of this where you don't have to support with your hands, in which case you might want to find something like a piece of a yoga mat or a towel that gives a little bit of cushion to your forehead. For some people, though, the arm position is actually helpful regardless of that, because sometimes just releasing the arms will put some tension in this upper part of the shoulders, but something to play with. You may find that holding on to the sides of the chair back is good for your arms. So there's all this is to say there's lots of ways you can play with this. Okay? So gonna move this back into its original position because the shadows are a little weird over there. What we look at next can be done sitting or standing. And get out of the glare here. So I'm going to do this sitting, but you could absolutely do it standing. We're going to now move to what I'm going to call nerve glides. And these are practices that put alternate tension and slack into various nerves. In this case, we're going to spend time with the ulnar nerve, the median nerve, and the radial nerve. So we'll go in that order. So we're going to go from the little finger side, middle, and then the thumb side. And this is more specifically focused on nerves, but it's also about releasing the connective tissue. So what's going to happen? There are periods of this where we put tension on the nerve, and there's various arm positions that have to do with the pathway of the nerve itself. So for the ulnar nerve, the position is like this. So have you ever done this? Okay, that is putting tension on the ulnar nerve. So you could actually do that for this practice, but you can also we're gonna flip the hinge. We're just gonna do the right to start, just the right. We're gonna do each individually, Now, so the distal end, and when I say distal, that is the furthest away, is now on tension. To put the proximal end on tension, we're always, with the brachial plexus, going to lean the head away and turn. And you may feel some little more tautness on this side. Okay, so this is both ends on tension. And then we're going to slack the nerve. It's kind of like those Egyptian hieroglyphs kind of thing. Okay. Okay. So you can side bend and turn a little bit away. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to keep the tension distally, but move the head. So we're slacking the proximal end. So the head goes toward the arm. Okay. Distal end is on tension, but the proximal end is slack. Then move the hand away and move the head into tension. And then head toward, hand toward. Hand away, head toward and hand toward. And then we're going to go back to putting the whole pathway on tension. So head leans away and you turn your head. If this is at all too much, you can moderate that with how much you're turning your head. If that nerve is really tight, this might be pretty intense. Okay? And then release. So we want to be really easy with this because the movement may be unfamiliar at first. There may be a little more effort involved, but as you work with this, it'll get more familiar. And this is really useful and powerful for making the nerves, when nerves are working well, they actually are able to slide in their sheaths. So this is a way to help them slide in their sheaths. Okay. Now it's important with these techniques to do both sides because of that kind of guy wire effect. So if some sorts of interventions, we might only want to work on one side, but for this, we're going to work on both. Because if you just glided that one side and that's all you did, there would start to be an imbalance in the two sides. So we're going to do the ulnar nerve on the other side. So we're going to start with the nerve fully taut. So bring the elbow back so the hand kind of turns toward your head and then side bend your head away. So get the palm facing up. Yeah, yeah. And so that little rotation makes a difference in putting tension on the nerve. And just do this to comfort. So if it's too intense, just back off a little bit. Okay, now we're going to take tension off. We're going to slack the nerve. So, yep. And then bring tension back on. Take tension off. Bring tension back on. And then tip your head toward. So we're slacking the proximal end. As you take your head away. So now we're taut in the proximal end, slack in the distal end. And then go head and hand toward one another. Head and hand away from one another. Head and hand toward one another. So when you're learning this, it can be tricky to remember which way to go, but you can just follow the video. Head and hand away. And then lastly, wait. So head is still away. We're going to keep that. And we're going to bring everything into a taut state by taking the hand back. So remember, look here. You want your hand, palm faces up, little finger rolls back. Yeah, there we go. Okay, release. And just move your head gently. So with that ulnar nerve, you want to keep this position almost like you're holding a tray or something. When this end is on tension, then it goes this way, okay? That is the ulnar nerve. We're going to go to the median nerve. How's everyone doing? Okay? Okay. So the median nerve is perhaps the most intuitive one because it goes down through the middle and we're going to crease the palm up. Again, do this. You can moderate the intensity by making that crease not quite as sharp and then take your head away. This is putting the nerve on tension and you may get a sensation of a stretch through the middle of the forearm or into the palm. Okay? And then we're going to take tension off by taking head toward the hand drops. Okay? And tension on, tension off, tension on now. Take your head toward the hand. And then as your head moves away, hand drops. It's important to do the glides, which we are doing now, which are alternating tension and slack. Head toward the hand puts tension on. It's important to both do the maximum tension from both ends and do these slackings from either side in alternation. Okay, and then keep the hand in that extended position at the wrist and take the head away. We're going back to tension. And you may be able to feel the pathway of the nerves through this area of the neck. Okay, release. And just move your head around. All right. Other side. So crease at the wrist and tip your head away. Make sure you're not doing too much. And it can be a side bend. It can also be a little bit of a turn, depending on what feels good to you. Okay, and then slack from both ends. Put tension on. Slack from both ends. Put tension on. And then head toward the hand. Hand is still creased at the wrist. And then drop the hand, head moves away. Head toward the hand. Head away, hand drops. One more. And this time, head away, hand drops. Then keep the head away, recrease the wrist. And we are on tension. And release. Okay, move your head around. All right, this one's a fun one. The pathway of the radial nerve wraps around. This is interesting. What you're going to do, have your elbow bent, right hand, and then putting tension on is internally rotating the forearm so the thumb rolls back. But have the elbow bent, don't straighten the arm. Yeah, right there. Okay? And then again, as with all of these, we move the head away into a side bend and perhaps some rotation. This is going to the thumb side. Okay? And then to take tension completely off, the head goes toward as usual, and we're going to externally rotate the arm so the thumb rolls out. And then put tension on. Take tension off. Put tension on. Okay, then head goes toward, keep the arm position the same until when the head goes away now, externally rotate. Yeah. Internally rotate, head goes toward. Externally rotate. Internally rotate. Then keep the internal rotation in the arm and tip your head away. Once again, we're putting tension on. Yeah, okay, release. Important to note, it's not about trying to get a maximum stretch. If you do that, you can irritate the nerve. So it should be within a reasonable range of ease, though you will feel more sensation, more of an experience of a stretch in any of the ones where you're on tension through the whole pathway, but you don't want to be then really trying to stretch further. Okay, make sense? So we got the last of these, which is the left side radial nerve. So first, elbow is a little bit bent, internally rotate so the thumb rolls back. and then tip your head away and perhaps rotate depending on what you feel gives you the clearest pathway. Okay, so we have tension on now, and then take tension off. Externally rotate, head tips toward. Internally rotate the arm, head tips away. Externally rotate. Internally rotate. Externally rotate, head tips toward. And then internally rotate. So do the internal rotation, head goes toward, and head stays toward, and then externally rotate, head goes away. Internally rotate, head goes toward. Externally rotate, head goes away. Internally rotate, head goes toward. And then keep the internal rotation, tip the head away. And release. All right. Take your hands to the sides of your neck and the back of your neck. So finger pads will come close to one another at the back of your neck. You're going to gently rest the palms on the sides of the neck with a soothing attitude in your hands. And just let yourself breathe easily in and out through the nose. And then with your finger pads in the back of your neck, you can make circular motions into the back of your neck, moving from up down toward where your neck meets your upper back. And do this a few times. One more time. Now, you can use the thumb edge here, that is the radial edge, or the little finger edge. What we're going to do is we're going to come just below the ear with either of those edges, whichever is more comfortable for you. And we're going to put a little bit of pressure on and glide down. And do this slowly a few times. Okay. Then lift your right shoulder and very close to your neck, you're going to take your thumb and finger pads. Thumb is going to go more in front. Do the opposite hand. So left hand. So lift that shoulder up. That is going to expose the edge of the trapezius muscle here. Come right into that corner between the neck and shoulder, and there's going to be some tightness there. So the first thing you can do is kind of squeeze like the bill of a duck between the fingers and the thumb. Squeeze into that area. And then, if you get tired of that, you can take either the finger pads or the edge of the hand. And if you angle in and down, you'll likely find there's a particular spot that's quite sensitive, and you can work into that area. Okay, we're going to move to the other side. So first lift the shoulder. That will expose that edge of the trapezius a little bit better. And start thumb to the front, fingers to the back, and squeeze the tissue in between the thumb and the fingers. And then perhaps with the finger pads, perhaps with a different edge of your hand, press. Don't be too tight in the hands, but you're gonna press at an angle in and down right at that corner between the neck and the shoulder. And feel how you can often, by taking the fingers together, that will be easier because the fingers are bolstering one another, and that can make it less tension, less effort for the hand. Okay. Before we go to a resting pose, we're going to do a little bit with isometrics. And isometrics, in some ways, overlap the nerve glides, but this is more a muscle centered practice, but it's very much the nervous system. And one thing that research has shown about doing isometric practice is that um, doing lower intensity, so isometric means the muscle length stays the same. And because that muscle length stays the same, we can change the tension. If there's a firm force restricting, I could be not very intense in the activation of the muscle, or I could be quite intense. Okay. Um, by doing longer isometric activations for around 30 seconds, there's a beneficial effect into the tendons. Because in that time that the muscle is engaging, the tendon lets go. And if it spends like 30 seconds doing that, that letting go allows the tendon fibers and ligament fibers, depending, to distribute and kind of remodel, because both tendons and ligaments like to be in a regular kind of wavy pattern in their fibrous arrangement. And when they're tight, those fibers are generally disorganized, and there will be kind of boggy places and more tight places. This is a way to remodel tendons and ligaments. So there is a muscular effect, there's a neurological effect, but also an effect into the connective tissues. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to side bend a little bit, and I encourage you to not use a lot of intensity for this. Okay. Take your right hand to the head. So you tip your head to the right, and you're just going to gently press your head into your hand. Don't use too much force. You're going to feel this in the side neck muscles. Okay, release that. We're going to go to the other side. Now bring your head to center, slightly bow your head, place your palms on your forehead. You're going to press gently your forehead into your hands. So muscles on the front of the neck are working, not too much intensity. Then lift your head a bit. So you take your head and neck into extension, hands behind your head, and press back into the hands, but again, not too intensely. So so your head steadily presses. Yeah. Get a broad contact with the back of your head. Yeah, with the palms. That's it. Okay, release that. Just squeeze the back of your neck. And then we're going to turn the head to the right. Place your hand on the side of your head and press into your hand. So we're now rotating. Release that. Turn your head to the left. And release. There's more of these that we can do. We're going to actually do one more. We're not going to do the whole of this sequence, but so we side bent to the shortening side. We can also activate the lengthening side. So now you'll side bend to the right, take your left hand to the side of your head and press back into your hand. Again, not too much intensity, but those lengthening muscles are now working as though you're trying to come back to midline. Release that. And hand on the side of the head and press as though to come back to midline. And release. And gently turn your head side to side. Okay. Before we go to rest, let's stand up for this. So we're going to do some arm and shoulder movements. This is a practice that is, I would say, is my most fundamental baseline shoulder and arm movement practice. It's very simple. It's not a lot of movements, but if done consistently, it can really make a difference. So in a way, you could think of this as now we're taking movement into the picture to sort of reinforce everything we've done with the nerve glides, with the isometrics. Okay, palms together, interlace your fingers and sweep the palms forward. If your shoulders ride up, just bend your elbows. We want to prioritize the shoulders being broad. Okay? Okay, arms out to the sides. If this level of the hands is hard on your shoulders, just take the hands a little lower. Okay? Keep the lower ribs a little bit back and the hips back as well, so you're not overextending through the trunk. And then with an exhalation, take your arms behind your back. If possible, interlace. That is hard on your shoulders. You can have the hands separate with the thumbs facing down. Okay. And then lastly, take the right elbow over the left. If the shoulders are tight and back, the elbows may not come all the way together. That's okay. You can just work here. If you can do more, you can wrap the forearms around one another and clasp at the hands. So with that lower elbow, I'm taking the little finger side of that hand to the thumb side of the other and then rolling the thumbs toward midline. Okay, release that. Palms together. Interlace the fingers the other side, the other index finger on the outside. Sweep the palms forward. If you're not sure which one that is, it's the one that will feel, the interlace that will feel a little odd. Okay, perfectly fine to bend the elbows if that helps you settle the shoulders. And this is a good one to work with incrementally. So if you have to bend your elbows, just stay with that. And then very, very, very gradually, you can start to lengthen the arms out over time. Arms out to the sides. And again, if shoulder height for the hands is a bit much, it's totally fine to have the hands lower. With an exhalation, interlace your fingers behind your back. Again, this is the second interlace. We want to broaden in the top and front shoulders, though you can overdo taking the shoulder blades close together. We get a little bit of that, but you don't have to do too much of that. Okay, release that and left elbow over top the right. And then you can clasp. And this is Garudasana arms. Garudasana is the eagle pose. There's a leg component to it. We're just doing the arm component here. Okay, release. And then we got one more element, which is Right arm comes behind the back. If the shoulder is tight, this is a movement that may be difficult. So if you just get here, that's fine. If the arm is horizontal, that's fine. If you can bring it up, by all means do that, but just don't force the shoulder. Okay, do the other side. Same thing on the other side. And then we're going to move. So go out, in on the other side, go back and forth. So you basically go in, go out. And the movement of this is an important part of it. So it's less about a stretch and more about the quality of the movement, and just make sure that you're not forcing your shoulder. And by doing this consistently over time, you'll start to develop more range of motion. Okay. So it is 8 o'clock. I would like to do one more resting pose that'll take like 5 to 10 minutes. Is that okay for everyone? Okay. So we're going to set up actually, there's a few options. The one I will recommend, if you are able to do it and it feels good, is take a chair, take a couple blankets. This is a chair shavasana. And if you don't do this, you could do a different supine variation, perhaps with a bolster under your knees. Here. Present for you. Okay. Depending on leg length, you could also use a bolster. And here's what's going to happen. This is the way I like to come into it. So easiest way, shift close to the chair, lower legs on the side of the chair, come down onto your side. And then this is easy because you can just roll the legs up onto the chair. And what we're after here is the knees being at 90 degrees along with the hips, which will mean the knees are basically directly above the hips. If your head tips back, you can use a little bit of elevation. However, we're going to do a little bit more with releasing the head and the neck with the hands. So here we are. First, just settle in. Feel the lower legs on the chair. Your back body settling into the floor. Then take your hands, cradle the hands underneath the back of your head. The elbows are going to be out to the sides. So if possible, lift your head and your hands just a little bit off the floor. And with this, we want to encourage the neck to relax as much as possible. And so we're going to be more active with the hands and the arms. So first off, gently rotate your head side to side, but let your neck muscles be as soft as possible. So you're doing this with the hands and the arms, not the head. And when you turn, you can, so long as you have the range in the neck, you can turn your head into the forearm on that side and then go to the other side. It goes without saying, we want to move in a range of ease. Come to center. Now you're going to side bend. So we're not rotating. You're going to tip your head to one side. And again, it's the hands and the arms that are doing this. Tip your head to the other side. Come to center. Gently traction your head away from your neck and shoulders. And then keep the back of your neck long. Lift your head up a little bit. And then slowly release it down, but keep the back of the neck long as you're descending so that you don't tip your head back. So you can lift and lower. And then keep one hand on the back of the head and take the other hand and gently knead the back of your neck. And switch. And then very gently set your head down on the floor. Arms rest at the sides. You can have your palms facing up. You can encourage your breath to lengthen just a little bit. Again, be unhurried in your breaths. So it's a really fine stream moving in through the nose, moving out through the nose. Now you can open your eyes, gently rotate your head to one side, back to midline. Do this slowly. Other side, back to center, side to side. Come to center, just rest. Let the tissue soften. Let your breath soften. Let your awareness soften. And then if you've closed your eyes, you can open them again, roll over onto your side, and pause resting on your side. And then slowly come on up. And thank you very much, everyone. Namaste.